Fontaine is here, which means it's time for part 5 of Goku's journey to begin. But before that, let's go over the rules. We can only use Traveler, level 1 Dual Blade only, no co-op, and lastly, we can only use the nation's element for each region. But we're gonna add an asterisk here, since you guys have rightfully pointed out that the Traveler can swap elements at any time. So I'm gonna change the rules to where we can swap to another element if we have to. We've done it in the past already, so it's not really a big deal. Now that we've got that covered, let's see if we can beat Fontaine only using the lore-accurate Traveler. Yeah, we gotta do Caribert. But don't worry, because this is gonna be fast. For one particular section, we need to light a bonfire, which we actually can do with Dendro Traveler. If we use our skill on the Pyro Slime as it's next to the bonfire, it will actually ignite it. The issue is that once we start the next section that requires the fire, our fire disappears. Why? Since there aren't any more pyro enemies near this area, we can't use Dendro anymore, but we can use Anemo. Anemo Traveler is cool in that whenever they get hit with an element, they essentially become that element.
Windblade!
Unless that element is Geo or Dendro. But there still aren't any pyro enemies here, so what can we do? The answer is pretty simple. Goku gets hit by a pyro enemy, which burns us alive. We teleport back to Sumeru, and once we're there, we use our pyro status to burn this organism that you've probably never seen before. By burning the grass, we can constantly put Goku on fire and make a pyro swirl next to the bonfire.
Oh yeah, baby.
Good job, Anemo Goku. But since we don't need you anymore, it's time for Dendro Goku to tag back in, so he can take on this old Abyss domain. Doing this domain reminded me of how useful Dendro actually was in combat, until we reached the Cryo Abyss Herald. I don't even know where to begin with this fight, except I actually do. It was pretty boring. I just lied to you earlier. Cryo Heralds tend to be a lot more aggressive than the other Heralds so far. These enemies will chase you down and make your stamina bar beg for mercy. And as you can probably guess, since we only have a level 1 Dual Blade, we do not do much damage to this enemy, and it's only made worse when he puts his elemental shield up. Just take a look at this.
He moves right there. There.
And since Dendro still does not react with Cryo, we're stuck with this as our damage. After an agonizing 50 minutes, we did eventually beat the Cryo Herald. And yes, that 50 minutes was for this fight alone, not the entire domain. With Caribert now finished, it was finally time to start the Hydro Nation, Fontaine. Upon entering the new land, we stalk some NPCs so we can study the rules of this country. We learn a couple of new things, one being that they view trials as a form of entertainment, and that the court uses a machine that I will not try to pronounce to decide the verdict. Another new bit of information we learn is that the name of this country is actually pronounced Fortnite, but we overhear a girl say that our joke wasn't funny, which to her credit, she is kind of right. But we choose to respond with words made famous by the Electro Archon.
You should kill yourself now.
Oh my gosh, she's actually gonna do it. We talk to the cat girl of this region, Lynette, and meet her older twin brother, Lenny. They inform us of the prophecy. Basically, all of the people of Fortnite are cringe, and their god is the only based one. So when the special waters rise, they will all disappear. Well, it's a good thing we're not from here. Take me to your god. Oh, she's right around the corner. This is Focalor, aka my wife, who looks surprisingly accurate to my depiction I made over a year ago. Man, can you believe that? She's here to challenge us to a duel. Fighting gods, I've got a resume.
Don't do that.
But not a literal duel. She wants to see our skills in the courtroom, so she tries to charge us with having a flying object on the first 3 days of the month. What? Lenny foils her plans though, because he put a leash on Paimon. And seeing as how we have defeated the goddess of justice with the power of friendship, she leaves. Following our first W of the nation, we make our way to Fortnite using the newest advancement in Tevat technology, public transportation. It's not as exciting as it sounds. As we reach land, we come across the twins' little brother Fremine. He's a diver, and he makes us go into town for him because he shares the same fear as most Genshin players. Socializing. On our way to, once again, do someone else's job, we come across a mechanic and some debt collectors. During this little scuffle, we get to see Child again. Huh, what a pleasant surprise. If only it wasn't revealed to us in the trailer.
So this is how justice is done in Fontaine.
And by having a reunion with our friend who just so happens to be kinda a terrorist and is involved with the most infamous organization in Teyvat, comes our first bit of combat in this quest. And we don't even get to use the new Traveler. It's okay, Hydro Goku. Your time will come. But something weird happens after this fight. Hoyoverse reuses Child's final attack animation as a punch, and because of this, he holds an invisible bow at the end. Oh, and also his Hydro Vision turns off, so he gives it to us.
Day 2.
For our second day in Fortnite, we get the honor of watching the Cat Twins perform magic after once again using the public transportation. When we reach the theater, we hear a voice coming from the Fontaine that apparently no one else can hear. I guess that stuff from Sumeru hasn't worn off yet. Drugs. Inside the Opera House, we meet a gentleman who goes by the name Nouvelette, but I will call him Nerval for short. Hey, if the characters can pronounce the R that's not there, so will I.
Farewell, Nervalette, Nervalette.
Nerval here is the Chief Justice of the Opera House. His job includes telling us what we already know at the end of a trial, and reading the verdict from the machine that I will still not pronounce. He's here to look cute and enjoy the show, and since he's already doing the first part, let's go ahead and enjoy the show. Well, that escalated quickly. Now Lenny is on trial for murder, but not Lynette for some reason, huh? Why not, Genshin? Are you not for women's equality? Regardless, there has been an injustice, and it's our job to be their attorney, their ace attorney. In the last nation, we learned to think, but now we have evolved. We now know how to read and write, because we have to conduct an investigation to gather evidence so we can clear the twins' names. After we collect everything we need, it's time for the trial to begin. To start the case, Farina claims that we are lying, and reveals to the audience that the twins are members of the Fatui. Since this new bit of information is just so mind-blowing, we ask for the case to be adjourned. During our adjournment, we are just so upset that our so-called friends just so happen to be Fatus. I mean, seriously, how could we be friends with people like that? Once our timeout ends, it's time to continue our duel with Farina. Farina claims that Lenny vented and killed the female NPC, but when the male NPC saw it and tried to report him, Lenny shoved him into the box, which killed him. This is the truth of the events.
Objection!
Nuh-uh. You mean nuh-uh?
Which means that the real killer all along was the NPC. And the reason they couldn't find his body was because of a special type of water called slurp juice. Farina doesn't believe us, but then a detective named Navia shows up with a crucial piece of evidence. A woman. The woman reveals that she was actually the killer all along, but since she killed in self-defense, it's okay. The man tried to use slurp juice on her, but that didn't do anything. And since she's a thief who rolled a 20 on her strength check, she threw the man into the box, which led to this. And with this new bit of evidence, we've got everything we need. So now, we have been able to successfully shut down the Hydro Archon yet again. And to celebrate our victory, can you please tell us what we just learned 5 minutes ago, Chief Nerveman? I'd really appreciate it. After reiterating what we already know, it's now time for the machine to make its decision. Nouvelette got a 4-star. I can't believe it. This never happened. 3-star. Watch it not be a character, though. And it's a 4-star light cone. Oh, and Lenny has been declared not cringe. But now, let's learn more about this slurp juice. Never mind. With the case now over, we talked to the Cat Twins about their involvement with the Fatui. But since they aren't a criminal yet, we still can't fully trust them. As we're leaving, we meet up with Navia, who asks for our help in the serial disappearances case in Fortnite. Basically, a bunch of young women have been kidnapped, and nobody knows who's doing it. But we actually choose to decline. Wow, Goku. Good on you. You're finally showing some backbone like you did in Inazuma. And just like there, you fold easier than a wet paper towel, okay? And that is the end of Act 1. To start Act 2, we go back to the Fontaine to have another episode. During our trip, we encounter an Oceanid who asks us to find their old lover, Vache.
Yeah, here he is. Hey, can I go home now?
When we wake up, we get treated to a war zone. But I thought we were in Fortnite. You see what I did there? During the ongoing battle, our fellow dual blade enjoyers were helped with the even latester advancement in Teyvat technology, a gun. This is Chloride. She's kind of like an assistant to Farina. She was here to protect Navia, since that was Navia's father's dying wish. And because there is no more danger here, she leaves. But now it's time for us to conduct our investigation on the serial disappearances case. We've narrowed down our possible suspects, to 3 people. But since none of them seem to be playable characters, this could prove quite difficult. Let's go with the old guy, because he's not going to live much longer anyway. As this is going on, we find out that Child is actually being accused of the crime that we just so happen to be investigating. What a coinky-dink. But since we don't have enough evidence to convict the old guy, we decide to split up. Navia and her gang go to the Opera House while we get to do the fighting. At the Opera House, we discover that Child is actually fine with accepting the crime if it means he gets to fight Chloride. Ah, that's our Child. Never change, even though you probably should. Navia decides to intervene and change the trial to be about Marcel. Navia claims that Marcel knows the man who goes by Vache, which leads into the perfect cliffhanger for our side of the story. After doing some underwater diving, we made our way into this factory hideout. I don't even know what to describe it as, honestly. It just belongs to this guy. Either way, we finally get to do some fighting. So let's see Hydro Goku in action. Okay, so in the past, I did say Hydro Traveler would be broken, and I am humble enough to admit that I was wrong. I meant to say Pyro Traveler, not Hydro Traveler. It was an honest mistake. He isn't horrible. He does okay damage, and he does have sustain with his water droplets, but I do have 3 problems with him. The first being that his tap and his hold skill have the same cooldown. This may sound like a nitpick, but it feels really weird, especially since the DPS gap between the 2 moves are so different. Personally, I think the tap skill cooldown should be lowered. The second problem also involves his ability, with the issue being that he has to stand still to get most of his damage out. The reason why this sucks should not be a surprise to anyone. And lastly, the burst. It goes way too fast. Seriously, why is it so fast? What is this thing's problem? Where does it need to go? I know that the second constellation slows it down, but that just kind of proves my point. They clearly knew it was an issue, so they put it behind a constellation. It's just a worse version of Animo Traveler Burst. They both go way too fast, but this one is much worse because it does not suck up enemies. Even with these problems, I don't think Hydro Traveler is the worst solo Traveler variant. It's probably the second best behind Geo, and it just barely beats Dendro. Oh, and just a reminder that at this point, we really don't do any damage, which makes fights against these mechas that also like to shoot back not that fun, surprisingly. But eventually, we did make it out of the combat zone and reach the area containing all of the evidence. After seeing some honestly pretty disturbing dialogue for this game, we came across a list of names, with one of those being Marcel, which means we've got everything we need. So flash forward back to the Opera House and we reveal to the audience that we can talk.
But the truth of it, Marcel, is that you've always been Vache.
The Traveler speaks, and I listen. So what happened was Vache and Vinier were lovers, and they liked to adventure together. One day, Vinier drank the slurp juice, which caused her to die. But since Vache was from Snezhnaya, he did not die. Desperate to find answers, he straight up kidnapped women and tested different variations of slurp juice to try and find a way to bring his lover back. But alas, nothing worked. And if you need a recap of that, well, Chief Nerves got you covered. With all of the evidence gathered, it's time for the machine to make its decision. I got another 3-star. Oh, but the machine has declared Marcel to be cringe. Hooray! We got the bad guy, but we still need to wait for a child to get cleared for some reason. Another 3-star light cone. Oh, and Child was also found to be cringe. Once Nouvelette puts him in his place, we get to see the first instance of blood in this game. As we make our way out of the theater, Marcel pleads to take us to the place where we heard his lover call for him. Sure, it's quite literally 50 meters in front of us. Upon reuniting with his lover, we learn that the Oceanid is actually not his lover, but instead the souls of everyone he killed with the slurp juice. And they're pretty pissed at him. So much so that they actually kill him. Whoa, Hoyoverse. 3 deaths in just 2 acts? That's enough to get you on the kill count. I mean, they're just NPCs, so it doesn't change much, but we can definitely tell you're starting to get edgy. With one last visit to Callus's grave, we get forced into asking Nerve Man questions, and we are done with Act 2. To begin Act 3, we talk with Nerval again. He tells us about the conversation he had with Farina regarding a meeting with the Knave. Basically, Neuvillette was being a little scaredy piss boy and didn't want to accept the invitation. But of course, my goat, aka my Archon, chose to accept it. We then cut to another flashback where we actually see the meeting take place. This is the Knave. Her eyes are literally just a dark, twisted version of the Xbox logo. Basically, she wants to take Child back to Snezhnaya, but Nerval can't let that happen. So she instead asks if she can see him, but he can't let that happen. However, he does suggest staging an operation, which he can let happen. This is where we come in. We will now go inside the Fortress of Maripide just so we can check on Child. And as we make our way to the entrance, we get interrupted with one of the best changes they ever made to this game. I used to pray for times like this. Unfinished comedy, more like never gonna be finished comedy. Once we reach the bottom, we get acquainted with the Duke, the Warden, the man, Rio the Slay. But we'll call him Rio for short. He takes us around the place and introduces us to the nurse of this establishment, Sigilwine. She is a Melusine. I'll be honest, I don't really see the correlation. After a quick lunch, we get put to work.
Yep, we just...
Don't interrupt me when I'm...
Yes, sir.
I hope you like the story of this game because this is the most interesting thing you'll be hitting for the next 2 acts. Here's a clip of me falling to my death to spice things up a bit. Yep. Once we get done, we decide to look around while Paimon checks the cameras. Lenny is here, and so are his siblings. They came down to this place under the orders of the Knave. They are here to check on Child, as well as to see how this place works. And since we share a common goal, they want to team up. And seeing as how these Fatus finally became criminals, it seems like we can trust them now. Once we leave work to take our lunch break, we come across easily the worst part about being a newbie in the workplace: meeting the boomer co-worker.
Looks like they got you doing the easy work, huh, Cupcake? I just got out of a 250-hour unpaid shift of crushing my legs in a hydraulic press.
During our conversation, he tells us about the secret rules of this place, but if we want to learn more, we gotta give him some more V-Bucks. But it's nighttime, which means we need our big boy sleep. We wake up with an experience that, let's be honest, I think we can all relate to. Am I right, everyone? Because of his hydrovision, we were able to see some of Child's experiences while he was here in the prison. I guess you could say it gave us a vision.
Oh, boo yourselves!
But enough of that plot, let's get back to work. After our shift, we talk to a coworker and learn about one of the hidden rules. It says that if you work for 3 days straight, something bad will happen on the 3rd day during lunch. But to us, it just seems like these snowflakes are afraid of doing some hard work. On the 3rd day, we get to see for ourselves what happens when you work for 3 days straight.
What? It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness! Squidward!
Once we finish our thing, we begin our investigation. We found out that Sigilwine likes to stalk people when they're working, but she can get away with this because she can perceive people's health just by looking at them. Uh-huh, sure. Okay, but when I look at people to see if they're healthy, I'm called a freak and I'm told to leave the podiatric's office before they call the police. What a confusing world. We leave the production zone and head up to the infirmary to find out that Sigilwine usually disappears around lunchtime. But what could she possibly be doing during this time? As if we didn't just see her in the production area. I'm starting to think the Traveler might have some dementia here. I'll just fast forward these parts because nothing is really happening up until here. Stop. At this point, we learn about another hidden rule. That being, if you bet on the 2 people fighting against each other in the ring, you will wake up to something horrible the next morning. But we're already used to that. We wake up to Paimon. Booyah, baby, that's a zinger. After placing our bets on both people, we wake up the next morning and see a package being delivered to us. Huh, it says it's from Ted Kaczynski. That was a joke. It's actually a bottle with red liquid in it. Now I know what we're all thinking, but let me just remind you that the most blood we've seen in this game was in this cutscene, and that was only a patch before this. Once we leave our room, we continue investigating and find out that the Duke believes only idiots drink Fanta, and that the Fight Club only took the sponsorship because of the money. What a weird concept. After finding evidence of a new Fanta flavor being made, we talk to the boomer co-worker yet again. He asks us if we know about the supposed cannibal that's been living amongst the walls.
Well, of course I know him. He's me.
We then wait for nighttime and make our way through the tunnels to see what the big whoop was. Inside the pipe, we come across a group of people who reveal that they are actually friends with Child. And since we're also friends with the Harbinger, they will show us where he went. There. Child was last seen going into that area, but since it requires an expert diver to traverse through there, we can't do it. But we do know someone who can. And of course, Paimon has to tell us that the diver we were referring to was Freminet. Yeah, like we're f***ing idiots. He is the only diver we've met in this entire story. And that's the end of Act 3. For Act 4, we start out by meeting up with Lenny. We tell him everything and ask if Freminet can do the one thing he's good at. Lenny says it can happen, but we'll need to wait a couple days for him to finish. So in the meantime, we're actually gonna work like a team for once. Our team building exercise includes dealing with the security guard inside of the nurse's office. We head to the infirmary only to find out that we've been set up by none other than the Duke, who not only shut the door on Freminet, but also let Lynette get captured. As we confront Rio, we learn that he did all of this just so he could get a meeting with the Knave. All I can say is, I understand, but I still would not have done it because I'm married. Lenny doesn't accept the offer in time, which means that his siblings are still in danger. But since they're our teammates, we plead for Rio to reconsider. He agrees only if we can reveal the truth about the hidden rules. The secret behind the first rule was that the strange meat is a result of Sigewine. She wants to make the food because she knows when a particular worker is tired and she wants them to have a good meal. The problem is since she's a Melusine and not a human, she perceives things differently and that messes up the food. The secret behind the second rule is that the Duke does not like Fanta, and since the Duke believes that only idiots drink Fanta, they send test samples to people who are stupid enough to bet on both sides. The secret behind the third rule is...
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
But Lenny is done playing games, and as he charges at the Duke, he gets shot. But don't worry, it wasn't a bullet, it was just a tranquilizer. Remember, we don't kill playable characters in this game. As this is going on, someone enters the room carrying Freminet. It's Chloride.
Ah, Miss Clarande. My door.
She saved Freminet when he was outside diving, as he nearly died because he came into contact with the slurp juice. Chloride informs us that the slurp juice levels are rising and that it's mixing in with the seawater, which means that the prophecy is about to come true. Sigewine takes the family back to the infirmary, and we follow Rio down into the bottom of his office. Down here lies the Forbidden Zone, an area that holds off the slurp. Why is it so bright? I'm listening, Hoyleverse. Gosh, you don't need to blind me to get my attention. This shiny container is called the Chug Jug, but since the slurp juice levels are rising, this does not look good for the people of Fontaine. We're still fine though, by the way. After learning about the dark history of Fortnite, ironically, next to this bright-ass container, the Duke takes us to another part of the prison that holds his contingency plan for all of this. The battle bus. After returning to the dormitories one last time for a rest, we wake up in the night only to learn that the Chug Jug is leaking right now. This calls for an evacuation, but since we're the main character, we chose to go down to the bottom of the office to check on Rio and Chloride. I don't think we'll be of any use here, so I'm just gonna leave. Once we reach the surface, we meet up with Nerval, and he basically asks us if we can swap positions. Inside of the Opera House, we finally get to meet the Knave. The whole purpose of this meeting was basically for the Knave to just roast Farina to her face. She calls her incompetent because she's not really doing anything to stop the prophecy. Which, to her point, she is right. But to defend my wife? Her eyes are so cool, I mean, just look at them, they're so pretty, she can't do anything wrong. After what was essentially a roasting session at the middle school cafeteria table, we escort the Harbinger outside of the house, in which she thanks us for helping out her kids earlier, and tells us about the assassination attempt she made on the god of this region. Wait, what? Yeah, so Farina was just chilling around the city, being goaded.
You dare to run from me? Stop right this instant!
And this mean lady tried to take her Gnosis, but the Gnosis wasn't on her, so the Knave disappeared. This left Farina in tears, all alone, waiting for her husband to comfort her. This was a rookie assassination attempt, okay? What you really want to do in these situations is take the high ground. That way you can get a nasty lineup. My lawyers have advised me to not finish that bit. Alright, just a quick couple of questions about this whole situation. Why did she not have any protection in public? She is the god of this region, and you said that she is basically a celebrity. Why was there no security? And you might be thinking, MistahFeet, you're so funny and attractive. If you're her husband, why weren't you there? Well, that's because I was getting dinner ready. And second off, why did she not report this? You can see the Xbox logo behind the mask. It's pretty obvious who did this. After learning about this assassination attempt, we talk to Nouvelette and discover that he is actually the Hydro Dragon? Yeah, it was pretty obvious. We've only met 3 Hydro characters in this story so far, and one of them admitted to being the god, so it was only down to these 2. With one last bit of forced dialogue, we take another nap inside the fortress and have a dream about Child. There's not a joke I could make here that you haven't heard regarding this creature, so let's just end Act 4. To begin Act 5, we feel a disturbance and head over to Poison. Inside the city, we see the damages caused by the slurp juice and the destruction it has brought to such important characters like Disaster Victim M, Desiree's father, and Disaster Victim F. Come on, Hoyoverse, you literally could have put any name here. Don't turn into Monster Hunter. Navia reveals to us that her 2 assistants did in fact die as a result of the slurp juice. This is horrible news for the Dull Blade community, and it's probably the second saddest death we've had in this entire story so far. As we attempt to console her, Microsoft interrupts our conversation and brings up 2 interesting points of notice. The first being that the Fatui have actually been helping out Navia and her people evacuate the area. This is interesting because they're supposed to be the bad guys. The second thing she wants to talk to us about are some ruins located nearby. These ruins might contain some information about the prophecy. And since we now know that the knave is a criminal, it seems like we can trust her on this. After a long, wet run, we make our way inside of the ruins, and we do actually get to do some combat. But there is a cutscene in between those 2 sections, so let's just get that out of the way first. As we are crossing the bridge, the clap of our ass cheeks causes the ground to collapse, leaving Navia to fall into the slurp juice. We then go inside of Navia's mind to learn that she is actually in a court trial right now, with the citizens of Poison who also fell victim to the slurp juice. Since Navia died, they want her to stay dead, but since her 2 assistants are real ones even in death, they helped her return to the world of the living so she could be reunited with us and Nerval. Yeah, he's here now. But in order for us to continue that plot, we will need to go over the combat of this place. Our first group of enemies are some hilly churls and this weird avatar medium churl thing. We'll just call them avatars. Anyway, they're here because I don't know. I think Hoyoverse just wanted people to fight them since no one really explored this area. But hey, at least it's something new to fight. And update, they hurt. They do a lot of damage. Seriously, they kill us in like 5 hits, even with this much HP. And speaking of HP, let me address something real quick. For some reason, Fontaine characters like to hurt themselves, and Hydro Goku is no exception to this. I didn't mention this earlier when talking about Goku's issues, because back then when I first wrote the script, it really wasn't a problem. But it did become an issue when we entered this room. Dear God. When we use Goku's hold skill, we lose HP. The idea is that it's like a trade-off. We consume HP to do damage, and we get water droplets to heal ourselves back up. In theory, it sounds fine, but in practice, it is not that fun to play around, especially since the enemies could block me from getting them, even though I'm right there. There's 3 enemies to worry about in this room. Animo Avatar, Hydro Avatar, and a Ruin Guard. The Animo Avatar was my first target because they do a lot of damage. The Hydro one wasn't much of an issue because their attacks have horrible tracking. The Ruin Guard wasn't my priority because I figured, I've fought plenty of these guys before. Why would this one be any different? It's because of this room. That's why it was different. This room was definitely not big enough for the 4 of us. This felt like a cartoon character walking into a cabinet only to get their ass handed to them. The Ruin Guard has 2 moves that apply instant pressure to us: Beyblade and Rockets. When he starts to flail his arms around, I was left with one option.
Run.
Run to the outside, because if I get hit once, I will get put into the spin zone. I was able to sometimes snipe its weak points with our skill, but that strategy was scary because we had to stand still as it was slowly approaching us. The rockets were the other problem, and my personal least favorite part about this fight. Normally with the rockets, you can just run away and dodge them, but we don't have the space to do that here. So I just have to tank the damage, which can range anywhere between 1k to 7k. Oh, and by the way, just an update on the burst issue I mentioned earlier. Yeah, this thing is probably the worst burst in the entire game. It is awful. It just sucks. And before the 3 Hydro Traveler players try to come at me, I do have the second constellation. It is still way too fast for its own good. This room was a very rough experience for me, and I was pretty close to saying some bad words. But after leveling up some artifacts, we made our way back into the ruins, skipped past the fights that weren't mandatory, and had our rematch. At this point, I had kinda accepted that if we were in a fight with multiple enemies, we could not use our Dull Blade. We could only use our skill and change the game into an on-rail shooter, which did work, Slowly, but surely. Once we defeated the Animo Avatar, we focused our attention on the Ruin Guard, which unlocked the device needed to leave the domain. We didn't have to fight the Ruin Avatar though. I guess it just saw how much effort we were putting into this battle and it just let us pass. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Hydro Avatar. As we progressed further into the ruins, we came across 4 stone plates, but the first one was missing. Since we were unable to fully comprehend these illustrations, Nouvelette says he will ask Farina about them personally. With our team disbanded, we now head back into the sewers and come across Mona. Well that's different. She's here because she's the only standard banner 5-star who hasn't been put into an Archon quest before. That was only partially a joke. She's really here because of some business she's aware of. The prophecy. But since she's not from Fontaine, it's all good. But we do ask her if she can call her teacher to give us some advice, and she says it can happen. The next day, we head up to Nerval's office and walk into an argument.
Hey, you! Back away from my wife.
Nerval doesn't believe she's really the Archon and is trying to dig answers out of her. She claims that she's told him everything, but he reveals that he's been stalking her for some time now and knows that she conducts her own investigations. What a weirdo. And because of his creepy habits, she runs off. The nerve of this guy. Get it? Because I call him Nerval. When we confront the stalker, he tells us to calm down because he has a plan, and he's thinking of putting together a team. We're in. We rendezvous at Poison, in which Chloride asks the team if anyone here has any hunting experience. I was joking when I mentioned Monster Hunter earlier, Hoyoverse. Our goal is to create a trap for Farina, to force her into telling the truth. And of course, the game has to tell us that the hunt was a metaphor and not a literal hunt. The game is rated T. You don't have to spell out everything for us. We're not 5. As we're preparing for the operation, we talk to a teacup. We really got to get Goku off that Sumeru pack. But basically, this teacup is conveying a message from Mona's teacher's friend, Mage In. She tells us that the things we see may be different than that of what the gods may see. But will this come true? Probably. We are the main character after all. Anyways, let's get back to the trap. After my wife was bullied at the opera house for no good reason, she went over to Poison to mourn the deaths of all who were there. We try to comfort her, but as we draw closer, a mob scares us off and a Scooby-Doo chase scene ensues. Once we lose the townsfolk, we convince Farina to go inside of this house to hide. And as she's just about to reveal the truth, the house unfolds to show her that we have actually been transported back to the opera theater. And what was the point of this, you may ask? To reveal to Farina that we can still talk.
I would like to charge you as a fraud who's never been the Archon in the first place.
Woohoo! Booyah, baby! That's my voice actor right there. We have right to believe that Farina is not a god, but instead a human. We have 3 pieces of evidence to back this up. The first being that the knave did not feel any type of divinity around Farina during the assassination attempt. By the way, how has nothing been done about that whole situation? The second piece being that she didn't understand why Child was sentenced as cringed by the machine, even though she supposedly made them. And lastly, the slurp juice. My love bravely puts her hand into the juice without question, and thankfully she did not disappear. So it looks like she is a god, except that that was only a small dosage of slurp juice, and she experienced the same symptoms as every other Fortnitean, which means we've got everything we need. With all of this evidence gathered, it's time for Farina's sentence. A 5-star? Nouvelette finally got a 5-star. I guarantee it's not going to be a character. It glowed orange. How the fuck? But anyways, Farina has been found cringe, and the Hydro Archon has been sentenced to the death penalty. But as this bit of drama is going on, Freminet interrupts us to bring out a stone tablet onto the stage. This is the first of the 4 tablets we saw earlier, and thanks to our reading comprehension skills we gained from the past 2 nations, we have finally learned the truth. The people of Fortnite were born cringe because they are not real humans. Fortnitians were originally Oceanids, but since they wanted to catch that victory royale, the Hydro Archon put slurp juice into their blood so they could catch that dub. The only issue with this was that she did not consult the heavenly principles. So they essentially said, bet, wait 500 years from now. The 3rd stone tablet says that the people of Fontaine would put the Hydro Archon on trial, and gulp, that's what we're doing right now. Which means that the prophecy is really coming true. And finally, the 4th tablet, which states that the root of all of Fortnite's problems come from whales. Come again? The secret has been revealed. This whale is in fact not from this world. They would consume slurp juice, but since it's a big fella, they need a lot to satiate their appetite. Because of this, they would spend money, try and support their hunger by consuming all of the contents of Fortnite. Once the slurp juice is gone, that means the whale is gonna start looking for people, since the god put slurp juice into their blood. But before we can do anything to stop this whale, it's time for plot. Let's look at Nerval's side of the story first. On his end, we encounter my ex-wife. All of those stories have finally come together. Oh no, Hoyoverse. You should have covered the feet. This is Focalor, who does not look as accurate to the depiction I made earlier. Her goal was not to deceive the people of Fortnite, but instead the gods above. This body is her divinity, while her spirit is the human counterpart Farina. She essentially put Farina out there as a decoy. Farina was set to act as a god for hundreds of years, which leads to us experiencing a glimpse into Farina's reality. After having a bit of a short king moment, we met Farina on stage and turned off the stage lights. The point of this was to have a fight with these mechas. And hey, I'm not gonna complain about that. But I will complain about this burst again. Seriously, what the fuck? It didn't even stay on the wall. It went inside of it. What does this move do? But back to the plot. Farina lived a long life of hardships, being faced with tasks that she can honestly do nothing about. She lives a lie. She is an actress playing a role. And after having played that role for 500 years, she's grown tired. All she wants is to reunite with her husband. We now return to Nerval's story, where we learn that the device made by the Archon was designed to actually kill the Archon and restore the authority of Hydro Archon to its rightful sovereign, the Hydro Dragon. With the transition to the new Archon, Focalor is no more, and Farina can now live freely with her husband. Now it's time for Nervman to exact his authority by declaring the people of Fortnite to be not cringe, ridding them of their curse. Oh, but can we deal with this rift in space-time that's still in front of us? Thanks to our pre-climax anime flashback, we can now start the climactic battle with the whale. It didn't really go too well for us, so Nerval empowered us with his new Archon abilities, which include symbols and immortality. And because of these buffs, we defeated the whale. He's still not my Archon though. With the whale problem finished, we meet up with Genshin Impact Z, Hoyoverse's flagship game. That's not a sponsor segment, but it could have been. Come on, John. This is Skirt, Child's teacher.
So actually, I think
she's here to clean up the mess that the whale caused, since it's her master's pet. And since our battle with the whale took up all of its energy, it has caused the tides to go crazy on the surface of Fortnite. But everything's okay, thanks to Rio's battle bus. After the last bit of forced dialogue, we meet up with Microsoft, who is already in possession of the Hydronosis. And since she already has it, we went ahead and gave her Child's Hydrovision so she could match. We still don't know why that turned off, by the way. But at last, our time in Fortnite is about to reach its end. And we know this because it's time for the mandatory conversation with the God section of the Archon quest. Nerval here tells us about the upcoming nation Natland. Their identity consists of pyro, dragons, and war. Oh, and I don't know anything about what the Archon will look like, so here you go. To conclude our conversation, Nerval informs us about a secret conversation he had with Skirk, in which she told him about the truth of the Gnosis. That being, they are the remains of the third Descender. This is actually a pretty interesting twist, and since we are the fourth Saiyan, that leads to some pretty compelling theories. But hey, what happened to finding our sister?
Tell me why